Webinar. Oh, yes. Thank you. I will start again. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our webinar series. We're really excited to have Dr. Haley Omiso join us today. This webinar is being recorded, and one of the reasons that we record the webinars is in the advocacy around MMIR. Of course, lots of families come to us and ask us lots of questions, which is wonderful to be a resource in our community. And our mission is to equip people with the information they need to create change. And so we're really grateful that Dr. Haley Omiso is here to share her knowledge and what she's up to in her community so that it can be shared out in the future. So we record these, we send it via email afterwards, so then you can share it or finish watching if you have to step away. And then we also upload it on our YouTube so that it can be viewed later as well. So if you need to step away or if you want to share it with someone afterwards, it is being recorded for those purposes of just making more information accessible. But before saying much more, I'm going to introduce myself. So Vanga Charlene Apak, Anupaxis Kaakpik, Chinik Mugarunga, Suli na Chirvik Mugarunga, Akaga Sandra Baby Lu Apak, Naga Evan Luklan. So I said, my name is Charlene Apak. My Inupiaq name that I go by is Akpik, which is salmonberry. My family is from Gullivan in White Mountain, Alaska. I introduced my mother, Sandra Baby Lu Apak, and my son's son, Evan Luklan. And I'm grateful to work at Data for Indigenous Justice with my colleagues here on the call. So I'll have you all also introduce yourselves, and then we'll hand it to Haley to introduce herself and then to take us through the presentation. But go ahead, Antonia, do you want to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Antonia Comack. I am Inupiaq, and my family is from Shungnak, Alaska. I currently work at Data for Indigenous Justice as the resource coordinator, gathering resources and helping families find the resources they need when they're experiencing MMIP. And Sabrina?
Hi, my name is Sabrina Dunfree. I live in Palmer. I'm Denina and Inupiaq, and I am the administrative coordinator for DIJ.
All right. And Haley, will hand it to you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. All right. So I am the founder and executive director of Ohkomi Forensics. Let's see that me. Okini suni danaku isamaki ni tayo bigsingaksim Haley Omiso ni mochtoto amska pipikani gi hopitua ni mochtoto bonogasi gi itanyob ni tsitatski ni matsoko Ohkomi Forensics. Hello, everyone. I'm Haley Omiso. I'm an enrolled member of the Hopi tribe in Arizona and a descendant of the Blackfeet Nation in Montana. I am a recent graduate from the University of Montana PhD program in forensic and molecular anthropology. I'm still finishing up some things there, so I'm still here in Missoula. But I have also founded this nonprofit organization called Ohkomi Forensics in my downtime, I guess, whenever that is. And so I'll kind of be talking a little bit about what our organization does and kind of how it pertains to the MMIR crisis. So Ohkomi means to use one's voice in Nisquequaxin, or the Blackfeet language. We're a 501c3 nonprofit based in Montana that provides forensic services to the Indigenous communities and families impacted by the missing and murdered Indigenous persons or relatives crisis. So a little bit about us and kind of how we got started. So this is our board here. My company is made up of my family members. So myself, my husband, Vince, who is on the left there, he does our finance. And then my sister-in-law, Mariah, she does our marketing. So both of them went to the University of Montana and graduated from there. And then my mother, Monty, she runs several different businesses, a nonprofit. She does all of the things. So she kind of does our development and fundraising. So as a family, we've been impacted by MMIP or MMIR in one way or another, whether it was, within our home community or within our own families. So, we feel very strongly about this issue. And so that's why we created Ohkomi Forensics, was to be a resource for the families that have been impacted. So we are Indigenous-led. As an organization founded and led by Indigenous individuals, we bring a unique and culturally sensitive perspective to our work. We understand the importance of preserving traditions and respecting the spiritual aspects of the search for truth and justice. We are also community-centered, so our approach revolves around the needs and aspirations of the communities we serve. We actively engage with affected families, local leaders, and community members to ensure that our services align with their values and aspirations. And then our commitment to justice. So we are committed to pursuing justice for every missing or murdered Indigenous person. Our advocacy extends beyond the immediate needs of family, aiming to address systemic issues that contribute to this epidemic. So Ohkomi Forensics, we believe that every individual has the right to be remembered, honored, and reunited with their families. So to kind of do some more background for those that aren't super familiar, I'll kind of go into what MMIP is. So Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons, also known as MMIR, MMIW, MMIWG2S. And so for some of the statistics that I have, a 2016 study reported that 5,712 American Indian and Alaska Native women and girls were missing at the time of the study. 84% of American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime, with 56% experiencing sexual violence. More than 1.5 American Indian and Alaska Native women have experienced violence in their lifetime. Indigenous women are murdered at a rate more than 10 times the national average. In 2020, non-Hispanic American Indian and Alaska Native people had the second highest rate of homicide among all racial and ethnic groups, with homicide being a top 10 cause of death for American Indian or Alaska Native females between the ages 1 to 45 and males ages 1 to 54. The bodies of Native American women are 135% more likely to go unidentified than the remains of women of other ethnicities in the U.S. Between 2009 to 2021, 490 Indigenous women and girls were the victims of homicide. Historically, homicide rates of Indigenous women were almost 7 times higher than those of non-Indigenous females. First Nation women between the ages of 25 and 44 are 5 times more likely than other women of the same age to die as a result of violence. Only 53% of murder cases in the NWAC's Sister in Spirit database have been solved, compared to 84% of all murder cases across the country. So these statistics are for Canada. Although the true number of victims will unlikely ever be known, current national statistics report as many as 4,000 Indigenous women and girls are believed to have been killed or gone missing in Canada over the past 30 years. So one thing that I always have to bring up when giving statistics on MMIP is that we don't really know exactly, how big this issue is. I mean, obviously, it's a big enough issue that we had to create this whole movement and create more resources for. But the statistics that I give you are most likely going to be an undercount, whether that's due to racial misclassification, underreporting, things like that. So that's just something to kind of be aware of. With that being said, we do have our current missing persons databases that are available online. So NamUs is one that involves Indigenous people. This screenshot is specifically for Montana. So when I took this screenshot, there were 24 missing persons cases found in Montana that were thought to be Indigenous. And then for Montana, we do have a missing persons database for the state itself. And then this one said that there were 43 individuals that had matched that same criteria. We also have the Bureau of Indian Affairs and the FBI databases. And so the issues that I have seen over time is that all of these databases are saying something different. And so we don't really, have a space where, all of these cases are, um, being shown. And so that's definitely something that I want to help with this company. Some of the cases that have motivated me to start this company and to kind of push forward in the forensics field are the ones that will be shown next. So Ashley Heavy Runner Loring is a classmate of mine. She is missing from the Blackfeet Reservation in Browning, Montana, where I grew up, and she's been missing since June of 2017. Um, you know, with a lot of these cases, there's a lot of rumors that circle around as to what may have happened to her, but the reality is she is still missing, and hopefully she will be found someday. Another case that I've worked on is Arden Peppian. She is also missing from the Blackfeet Reservation. She's a 3-year-old girl that has been missing since 2021. And so I will show you a few of the services that we have provided to the family in regards to her case later on in this presentation. Another case out of the Blackfeet Reservation is Leo Wagner's. He has also been missing since 2021 and still missing to this day. And he was last seen in the St. Mary's Bab area. Another case is Jermaine Charlot. She is a Salish woman that is missing from Missoula, where I'm stationed currently. And her case kind of hit me hard because she, did leave behind 2 young sons. And so I also have 2 young sons. And so, I really feel for her family, and I've been working with her family a lot and with law enforcement to, do what we can to help bring Jermaine home. So the MMIP or MMIR issue is not a new thing. We've been seeing these kinds of issues since times of colonization, even in the residential school era, which was the early 1800s into the late 1990s. And so, what we're seeing as a consequence from those schools is these unmarked graves that are still currently being investigated of children that did not make it home. So as of July 2024, 417 institutions across the U.S. have been identified. At least 973 American Indian, Alaskan Native, and Native Hawaiian children died while attending federally operated or supported schools. At least 74 marked and unmarked burial sites have been located amongst 65 different school sites. 140 institutions across Canada have been identified, and over 4,000 Indigenous or First Nations children have died while attending these residential schools. At least 966 unmarked graves have been identified. So same thing with these statistics, again, to be aware of underreporting and the other issues that pertain to these statistics. And, these are being investigated daily, and so I'm sure that these numbers have changed since I put together this presentation. Another issue that we face is having culturally unidentified Native or Indigenous remains being kept in museums, teaching collections, and private collections all across the nation and all across the world. And so this is something that I have been looking more into as I entered my graduate program. And so for my current doctoral project that I am wrapping up right now, I worked specifically with the Blackfeet tribe, where I'm from, because there are remains that were thought to be Blackfeet that were being kept at the university for decades. And so what I had proposed was to form a genetic database composed of living Blackfeet tribal members that can be used in these types of cases to then compare to those unidentified remains. The difference with this is that this database will be tribally owned, protected, and maintained by the Blackfeet tribe. All analyses were done on the reservation or at the university here. And this database is used only for the purpose of repatriation of both ancestral historic remains and MMIP cases if needed. And so I'll talk a little bit more about this later on as well. But first, I have to tell more of my background and more of my story and kind of how I got to where I am today. So when I was first putting together my PhD project, I had proposed this idea that we use DNA to a room full of tribal members from various tribes in Montana. My tribe, the Blackfeet tribe, was not there in attendance that day. But when I had proposed this, a lot of the tribal members got very upset as to, the use of DNA, my approach, I guess, at the time. But ultimately, what I was trying to do is, just do what we can to find solutions to get our people home. These remains, there are at least 25 to 30 individuals that were being kept here at the university, and under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, the law says that they need to be repatriated. However, when they are unidentified, it's hard to, give them back to their tribe and to their traditional lands because we don't know where they go. And so that's why I had proposed the use of DNA. And so when that idea got shot down the first time, I was not in a very good place mentally. I really just wanted to give up. I didn't even want to do a PhD because I didn't want to do a project that my heart really wasn't into. And so I ended up taking that summer off from research and just tried to, pick myself back up and get back on track. There was a lot of tears, a lot of long walks to try and clear my head. And so when I would go out on these walks, I would always see this yellow butterfly. And every time that I would see the butterfly, it just like brought me instant comfort. And it almost felt like someone was checking in on me. I had also just lost both of my grandfathers during that time. And so for that butterfly to come, and give me comfort, it just kind of made me feel like, okay, I can do this. I can push forward. I just have to pick myself back up and, see what we can do to still make this work. And so this is the butterfly that I had put into our logo for Ohkomi Forensics. And so it signifies hope, healing, and transformation. So what makes us unique is incorporating culture into forensics. So also during that time, when I was kind of having to find myself again, I went to my culture. I learned how to bead. I started making regalia for my sons and for myself. And I just felt like it was really healing for me. And I've learned over the years that by indulging yourself into your culture, it's a true act of decolonization. And so that's everything that I want to incorporate into the forensics field and into Ohkomi Forensics as a company. And so we really push for cultural sensitivity and awareness. So doing research prior to assisting a tribal entity and asking a lot of questions. Because I have worked alongside other forensic professionals that are just really unaware and end up doing things that can, harm us spiritually by, being in the forensics field and just not knowing. Empowering Indigenous experts. So in any field pertaining to forensic investigations in this sense, some examples may be Indigenous forensic scientists, law enforcement, traditional ecological knowledge holders, environmentalists, et cetera, et cetera. Just really uplifting each other and uplifting Indigenous voices, I think, is something that is super important in doing this work. Also establishing collaborative protocols, so holding cultural protocols to the same priority as scientific protocols. And some examples of that may be listening to tribal members' concerns when it comes to their culture and their own protocols, and then coming up with solutions based on those concerns. You can also include personal spiritual practices like smudging when working around human remains. So that's something that I myself do every time that I'm working in the lab. I always make sure that I smudge myself and that I have my medicines on hand. And then when we're out in the field and we're searching for missing people, I also smudge my team just to make sure that we are all protected when we are out in the field. To kind of piggyback off of tribal consultation and talking with tribal members, some questions that we can ask before even starting the work is, are there any cultural protocols that I should be aware of pertaining to your tribe or family when it comes to performing a search for a missing person and or handling remains? How can I be more culturally aware and sensitive when working with your tribe or family? And can you tell me more about the land we'll be searching on? Is there anything I should know about this area before we begin? What are your concerns? How can we best assist you? So something that I've come across in being an anthropologist and going into research is that a lot of anthropologists in the past will go to communities and say, this is what you need, so this is what I'm going to do for you, rather than what do you need and what are your concerns? How can I best assist you? So that's definitely something that we want to hit on when we're, doing forensics. So that brings me to my services, to our services. So we do field search and excavation services for missing people, forensic anthropology lab services, DNA analysis, and then MMIP advocacy. And I'll go into each of those a little bit more. Our motto is search, identify, rematriate. So for search, like I said, we do the field search and excavation. So we physically go out and we help the families or law enforcement search for these missing individuals. And so in doing that, we are all trained professionals. There are a lot of community volunteers, and typically that's, what it comes down to when dealing with MMIP cases is that these searches end up falling back onto the families and to the community. And so I find it very important that we have trained individuals out in the field that know what they're looking for and, know what to do in a situation that you do find something. But I also think that it's very important, that the community comes together to help. And so in this photo here on the left, this was a search for Jermaine Charlo years ago. There are no real human remains within these slides. Also, these are casts. So what I was doing with this, the community volunteers that don't really know what they're looking for, of some possibilities of what bones could look like if a person is skeletonized, and you come across a possible bone out in the field, and then what you would do in that case. Which in that case specifically, we had all of our trained professionals out there, and so we know, kind of the protocols for that, and I can talk a little bit more about that too. This photo on the right was a search for Arden Peppian, the 3-year-old, because she was last seen near a river on the Blackfeet Reservation. And so typically what we do out in the field, depending on the type of terrain, is we do a line search. So all of us will get into a line about arm's length apart. And then we all walk together very, very slowly. All of us have our heads down looking at the ground, so we make sure that we have scene security, watching our backs at all time, because there are large predators that are out there, and then just making sure that no other people are coming onto a possible scene. And so if we do find something, then we take pin flags and we will mark it, and then we will come back, and then we will go through all of those spots that had been flagged. And if it's evidence, we will collect it. And if not, we just pull the flag out and then we move. We keep going. Like I said, we work in different types of terrain. So we've been in the river a few times, in the lake, mountainsides, just everywhere, trying to search for missing people. This photo on the right is a mock excavation that we did, but it kind of shows you how we have to meticulously take down a possible burial site so that we're not disturbing the remains or any possible evidence. So it does take a long time to do, but we want to make sure that we do it right and that we train the other students on how to do that as well. So I was a lab leader for that session, and those are my students that did a very good job. Also, while we're out on field searches, we can bring in other teams. So we've brought in drone teams so they can basically get aerial footage of the area that we're wanting to search and kind of do some preliminary survey. They also have GPR capabilities or multispectral, so they can look at disturbances in the vegetation, which could be a sign of a possible burial site, or looking for anomalies in the ground as well. And then we also can bring in cadaver dogs or canine units. And so we all try to work as a team. None of us are end all be all. I really do think that by having a good team of experts that know what they're doing and, all have their own sets of skills, that's really what it's going to take to start solving a lot of these missing persons cases. For identify, so we do forensic anthropology, and if you're not familiar with what forensic anthropology is, basically we handle skeletal remains. We provide biological information about those remains. So we do skeletal analyses, so laying everything out, seeing what skeletal elements we have there, and kind of see what the bones can tell us. We can inspect decomposed remains for signs of trauma, pathology, things like that, taphonomy, because those can, help us in identifying a person or what may have happened to them. And then we compile it into a nice report and give it either to law enforcement or back to the crime lab or whoever is requesting it. We also put together a biological profile and helping, like I said, identify the individual. So that can sometimes, we sometimes have to do measurements. It really just depends on what elements are present that we get. So this photo on the right is looking for signs of trauma. So when I was doing my master's degree at the university here, I did my thesis on the ZMC, or the zygomatical maxillary complex, which is basically just breakage of the cheekbone and how that was associated to intimate partner violence or domestic violence, and looking for other facial fractures, head, face, and neck fractures that would pertain to IPV or domestic violence, so that can kind of, tell us more about, how law enforcement could handle a case from there, kind of, suggesting what may have happened. But since we're not medical doctors, we can't say the cause and manner of death, but we can give that information. We also do DNA analysis. So if we're working with super sensitive samples, like historic samples where you might not get a lot of DNA from them, we have to go into a clean room, wear Tyvek suits, gloves, masks, everything that you see here, bleaching everything down to make sure that we're not cross-contaminating anything with the samples. It gets very hot in there. I've spent some long days in there. There's no windows, but it's definitely all necessary so that you can get the information that you need. So talking about the information, some things that we can get from DNA analysis There's 3 different types that are labeled here. So autosomal DNA is DNA that you get from your mom and your dad, and then their mom and their dad. And then Y-DNA is only found in males and their dad and their dad and their dad. Mitochondrial DNA is found in the maternal lineage, so your mom, her mom, her mom. We can also look at the sex chromosome. So when trying to identify a person, if they have XX chromosome, they would be a female, and then XY chromosome would be a male. And of course, there's some variation within that too. We can also look at, for SNPs, which are single nucleotide polymorphisms, which are just a little change within the DNA strand that makes you unique. Similar to short tandem repeats or STRs, they're just a little bit longer than SNPs, and they're repeating, and that can kind of be distinctive to a person as well. So some tribal concerns to take into account. So when I was talking about the meeting that I had gone to where the tribal members weren't very happy, I learned a lot of things that day. A lot of things that I have since taken with me and, totally changed my perspective on how to handle these types of cases. And so one of the concerns that I had heard was using destructive analyses and techniques, and how that could harm the remains of the deceased individuals, which may then go against tribal wishes and cultural protocols. So how can we then prioritize and find solutions that will incorporate tribal wishes into scientific protocols? Well, I have been working on a non-destructive method, so it does not take any bone powder out like the other methods do. And so that's something that I've been putting into my workflow as I'm working with Indigenous remains now. And I am happy to say that it has been working. For doing DNA analysis, such as whole genome sequencing and the risk of going against tribal data sovereignty, that was also a concern that I had heard. So it's important that the tribal members know what they are agreeing to and ensuring their data is secure and only being used for what it was intended to. Also making sure that they are aware that they can remove their sample from a database at any time. So when I was doing my data collection, I did a whole panel to basically educate the volunteers that were there that were donating their DNA. Everything that we would be doing with the DNA, the things that we would be looking at, and just ensuring them that, it won't be used for any other research besides trying to get family members home. It's also important to represent the data in a respectful way and ensuring that people are okay with publishing the data. So anonymizing the samples was something that I did. And then if we do find a deceased individual that ends up matching with a living tribal member, I will then go back to the tribal member and discuss with them what they would like to do in regards to next steps. And if they don't want that information out there, then we won't publish it. And it's, as simple as that. There has been a lot of research done in the past on tribal nations that was not represented in a respectful way. And so that has made a lot of Native communities like they don't want to trust researchers anymore because of what has happened in the past, and rightfully so. And so I know that DNA is a very touchy subject for people, but I think that by educating them and consulting with them, we can still come up with solutions as to how to move forward. Another big thing that has been a huge topic in the DNA realm is forensic genetic genealogy, or FGG. And so this is also something that I have incorporated into my workflow when working with unidentified tribal members. And so basically what I did with the database of the living tribal members you try to match that against the unknown. And then by using specific applications and a specific machine or technology, it'll help us to build a family tree. And then we will then have to look at the living person's family tree and see where that unidentified person was at. And that's how we can get more information as to who that person may have been. So it's definitely super neat. I love doing my own genealogy. I definitely, have looked into a lot of that. And that's also something that has been empowering to me, is to see, your ancestors and where you come from. And so I'm really hoping that with this pilot study that I'm doing, that I can, provide that information to a lot more people. So for rematriate, I first have to go into the definitions. So repatriation is the process by which important cultural items and human remains are returned to lineal descendants or descendant communities. For rematriation, it means to return the sacred to the mother. By rematriate, we mean give back, but unlike the legal term repatriate, which signifies a simple transfer of ownership, rematriate means something more profound: a restoration of right relationships and a true action of decolonization aimed not just at righting a past wrong, but transforming our collective future. And that's from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada. And so I really liked that, using rematriation rather than repatriation. And so that's why I put it into our motto. And so this, is what it would look like to rematriate. This photo, I believe, is from a tribe in South Dakota, where they had a lot of remains, and then also cultural items that were being given back to the community and to the families. And then they can come together as a community and, give them a proper send-off, and, really incorporate the culture that way. And that can be, super healing for families and for tribal communities. And so that's really the main goal. So also with this work is advocacy. So I always say that I'm an accidental advocate because I've always been a super shy person. But, when doing this work, you have to advocate for those that no longer have a voice, which is also why I named Ohkomi Ohkomi. To give voice back to those that can no longer speak for themselves, and to help uplift the Indigenous voices that have, been silenced for so many years. This crisis is happening all over the world right now. And so we really just need to do what we can to come together and advocate for these families and these missing and murdered Indigenous people. So I've been a part of several different community events. These ones in these photos were events put on by our student group at the University of Montana. And so it's just really giving the families a chance to come and tell their stories. And like I said, to just really come together as a community and, help to heal each other. Some other, cool things have been happening too since we've been established. So I don't know if anyone's aware of the podcast Crime Junkie, but it's a podcast that I've listened to for years and years now. And so when we first launched our company, they reached out to us and, they said that they really loved our mission and our vision, and they wanted to donate $25,000 to us. And I was like, heck yeah, that sounds great. And so they've been super awesome in helping us, get started with things. And we were able to buy a lot of our field equipment to go out on searches and put on those advocacy events as well. I also became a member of the Montana Missing Indigenous Persons Task Force as advisory council. So that photo in the middle there is with me and the Attorney General on my induction day. And then I also have to give props to Melissa Skeet, also known as Skeet Fighter. She's an ultra trail roller skater who roller skated from the state of Washington all the way to Washington, D.C. To raise awareness for MMIP. And they made a stop in Missoula, so we got to see them. It was super awesome. So I definitely would recommend going and checking out her YouTube channel and her journey, and all the stories that she has accumulated throughout her journey. We've also gotten a lot of media attention, so I'm super glad that a lot of people are hearing what we're trying to do. When I started this company, I didn't realize that we were one of the first Indigenous-led forensic companies. I thought that was kind of cool. Um, and so, people are kind of catching wind of that, and wanting to, give us a platform to talk about this issue. And so, yeah, that's been really great to see. So what we hope to accomplish is to make others aware of the crisis that exists within Indigenous communities like MMIP, the residential school investigations, and NAGPRA repatriation cases, and then create solutions in cases where tribal data sovereignty and the use of destructive DNA analysis is a concern for tribes. So, like I stated, using minimal or non-destructive techniques, and really, stating that tribal consultation is the key there. Really including the tribe and tribal members into everything that you do when you're, carrying out these services. I really do hope that we can build one of the first Indigenous-owned forensics labs here in the States. I think that would be awesome. I mean, I know we do have our state crime labs, we have the FBI lab, but what often happens is that there's a huge backlog. And so I would really love to help, um, with some of that backlog and doing the DNA or skeletal analysis for MMIP cases and having our own space to do that. But ultimately, our main goal is to bring our relatives home so that our communities can begin to heal. So starting with today's webinar, the more people that are aware of these issues and the better chance, we have at solving them. I think that the more people we have trained in these areas, the more productive we will be when searching and recovering lost loved ones. So let's get started. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. I have put my contact information here. I am always open to talking with people about possible volunteer opportunities, ways that you can get involved, or if you have a specific skill that you think could apply to our searches or our analyses, anything like that, I'm always open to chatting more. So thank you so much for having me. Asquale.
Yay. I didn't realize my emojis don't work in webinar form. I was trying to heart you the whole time and clap.
Oh. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for all of this amazing information and clearly all the hard work that you do each day in your community and for our people as Indigenous people all over Turtle Island. I'm just really impressed at the work that you're able to do. I have lots of questions myself, but I want to prioritize you all who joined the webinar. So if you have any questions, there's a little Q&A box that you can put them in, and then we can read them aloud and answer them. There is also a survey link, and that really helps us be able to provide these kinds of webinars and get feedback from you all directly. So please fill out the survey. It's short. And if you have questions, let us know. And I'll also invite my co-hosts, Antonia and Sabrina, if you all have questions, of course, feel free to ask them. But one of my questions that I had noted was, so do you have your own, does Ohkomi have their own labs, or do you use like other university or state labs, or how does that work? Because that's pretty costly from my understanding, even just talking with the state of Alaska and their labs.
Yes. currently we partner with the University of Montana's Forensic Anthropology and Molecular Anthropology Labs, since that's where I have done all my research. And so I know, kind of how things are set up there. But as we grow, I definitely would be looking at other labs across the nation too, if they were set up, for that kind of work. But yeah, it is very costly. Um, but yeah, that's what we do right now here in Missoula.
Yeah, and I just want to say I'm also really impressed at the breadth of services that you will provide, the searches. I love seeing all the training that you're doing with other Indigenous people and training them in those skill sets. That's so exciting, and it's a lot of work to mentor. And so I just want to uplift all that you're doing. And I really related to you saying like, this started as a PhD project, and then I think that's happened to a few of us. And then you
Yeah.
mentioned being like an accidental advocate,
Yep.
many times folks are just trying to help, their family and community, and it turns into something bigger. So,
Yeah, for sure.
all right, looks like we do have one question in the chat from Maka. What does spiritual rest or wellness look like for you between moments of the work?
Oh, goodness. Well, like I said, I do smudge every day. And just spending time with my family, trying to set aside time each day to really just rest, and set aside my work, because in doing this work, and I'm sure a lot of people feel this too, this isn't something that you can just leave at work. This isn't really just an 8 to 5 and you get to go home and, just kind of rest. It seems like my mind is just always going, going, going. So I definitely do have to, take those moments for myself, to, kind of try and set that all aside, because it does get to be, very overwhelming, because I just want to help so much. Um, but, I have to also realize that, I have to take care of myself and my children, my family. And so, yeah, I just do my best to try and set that time aside.
Yeah, what a great question. And yeah, it's such an important part of this work. Everyone who works in this to stay well, and because you mentioned like it doesn't stop.
Mhm.
um, one of my other questions was it's kind of well, I have a lot, but one of them was around sometimes we see in autopsy reporting that well, I have seen, I'll use an I statement. Sometimes when I have reviewed autopsy reports here in Alaska with various cases, the toxicology report of what substances, whether it was drugs or alcohol in the system, is often like listed first. And I felt like, I was like, is that like a practice of the field to start with toxicology in the reporting? Or sometimes I feel like, right, because I happen to only be reviewing cases of Indigenous people, sometimes I feel like, right, I might feel like it's a little bit biased or being um, discriminatory, right, by leading with substance in the reporting. But that's like something I always just wondered. I was like, maybe it's just a practice of this field, and I'm, or I'm just curious about kind of processes and things like that.
Yeah, so as far as I know, with what testing is needed, that will come from law enforcement as to what they're looking for. And so probably they're requesting that toxicology be, made a priority when they're doing an autopsy. Whether that is a bias or, discrimination. I guess I can't say for sure, but that's definitely something that I also see.
Great. Thanks for answering. And then now people are really excited and there's lots of questions. So I'm going to go just from the order that they came up in my queue at least. So Autumn asks, how can families or orgs in Alaska working with MMIP get involved or help uplift your work?
Awesome. Yeah. One thing that we've been kind of trying out is putting on trainings. So I don't know if I mentioned, but oftentimes the searches end up falling back onto the families once they feel like they're not really getting that support from law enforcement anymore. But then they don't really know what they're looking for or what to do when they find something. So we put on a training recently, kind of step by step, how to stay safe out there. So that could be something is just attending the trainings and then, making others aware kind of that procedure, I guess.
Awesome.
Follow up to that quickly, Haley. Do you offer that training to orgs outside of Montana as well?
We've only done one so far, and we had a pretty good turnout. And I know that a lot of people outside of Missoula and outside of Montana wanted to attend, and so maybe we'll put together like a webinar or some kind of online training that we can do. But being out in the field, that's definitely something we want to do in person. So that's another thing we've been thinking about too. And even traveling to the tribal communities themselves if we're requested and putting on a training there to show people, kind of our process from start to finish when we're out in the field, how to take photos as well, because that's a lot of things that we get when families are going out and doing these searches themselves is they'll take photos of bones and say, is this animal? Is this human? And I'm like, I can't see what that is. And so, just something like that of just teaching how to take photos with like some kind of scale, clear photo, not touching anything, kind of things like that. So yeah, I definitely want to put on more trainings around all of that.
Thank you, Haley. And I could definitely relate to the animal bone thing because I've gone on many searches and I'm like, I don't know if this is a moose bone or what I'm looking at. And my
Well,
friend
you can
Michael
always
is
send
the
me stuff
same.
too. Yeah.
Thank you for answering that.
Yeah, we're hoping to invite you again to Alaska. So stay tuned. We have some appreciation comments from Josie, who is an amazing person doing good work in our community as well. She says, Dogaden. Let's see, Kai has a question. What are ways Indigenous men can stand up and step into this work so it's not disproportionately carried by Indigenous women? Thank you, Kai.
Yeah, that's a great question. One thing that I always hear Indigenous women say is to be a good relative, and teaching your kids and your family members how to be a good relative and to stand up for Indigenous women and children. So I guess I don't have, a big answer for that. Besides, just take care of each other. And yeah, do what you can to uplift Indigenous voices. We definitely do see a lot of strong Indigenous women being advocates, in this world. And so I would love to definitely see more males being advocates.
Kai, you're on the right path.
Yeah.
You're doing lots. And Melissa Skeet or Skeet Fighter says, so thankful to see Ohkomi Forensics do such amazing work. What are your biggest goals for the future of, I think I mispronounced it, Ohkomi Forensics?
So since we have multiple services, we have different goals for each of them. So during the summer, we definitely do a lot more field work. So definitely wanting to, really support the families that are out searching for a missing loved one. And so I guess the biggest goal there would just to be, to help find them and help get the families answers. For DNA analysis, that's another huge thing that I've been doing, like with my project. So we are in the process of getting a positive identification for one of the individuals we're working with, and hopefully we'll be bringing them home very, very soon. So that's been one of my biggest goals. And then hopefully once the word gets out about that, we can start working with other tribal communities and doing the same thing for them too, and for families. And then for advocacy, just, trying to get out there and spread the word more. I've been to a lot of conferences. I think it was last year I spoke like at least 7 different conferences, which is a lot, and also trying to finish my project. But I just felt like it was, super important. And, if I'm given a platform, like I should use it. Um, so yeah, definitely have a lot of goals, a lot of aspirations that, we want to reach. Definitely bringing in more people on our team, which would involve more funding. So that's another goal. But yeah, there's a lot of work to be done.
And I have a question, Haley. First of all, I want to thank you for coming again. I was super excited to hear you speak again after seeing you in Arizona. So I just want to ask you, while you were talking about NamUs, I actually went on to NamUs and searched Alaska and victims that are Alaska Native and Native American, and 321 came up missing that were Alaska Native Alaskans, and then 11 unidentifieds that were Alaska Native Alaskans. So I know this question might be answered on our next webinar on September 24th, but what would your advice be to those families that are afraid to submit their DNA to compare to these unidentifieds that we have? Because like you said, you talked about there being a lot of fear for good reason. And I come across that with families right now, and I don't know the proper way to encourage them to do it without compromising their whatever they're feeling, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And that's basically the whole reason why I started the Blackfeet Rematriation Database, was for those individuals that were, wary of donating their DNA to these larger databases, because then they didn't know, what was going to be done with their data. And so that's why we created the local database, which for the whole state of Alaska, I mean, that's going to be difficult to do, but it's doable, especially if there are family members that are out there and an unidentified individual that they think could be their family member. That's something that we could do, is just by taking the family's DNA, and then the unidentified individual, and then trying to do a one-to-one match. But as far as, getting them to donate their DNA, I think it really just comes down to education, and assurance, and assuring them, that their information is secure. And I think that there are a lot of genetic counselors that are out there, that work with either NamUs or CODIS, like the actual databases themselves, that they could talk to.
And follow up to that, I think I just heard you say that it's something that you can do so that you would have the capability to take the Alaskans' DNA into your database and compare it to the unidentifieds. So they could do it through
Would
you
be
instead of through the
separate.
state.
Yes, it would be separate from the Blackfeet database, since
Yeah,
they have their own database now. But
yeah,
as Ohkomi Forensics, that's something that we could do in the lab here at the University of Montana.
yeah,
If we had, the unidentified individuals' DNA already, or the remains that were there. Um,
yeah.
or that could be something that, someone else wants to take on as a potential project of creating another community-based,
Yeah.
database that's specific to each of the tribes, because that's basically what I was trying to do for the state of Montana, but started with Blackfeet. But yes, it's a very long, lengthy process. And so I think that, um, I guess the easiest solution would be to just donate their DNA to the database. But, if there are, concerns that are there, then, we can definitely help them navigate that process and trying to find solutions for them. So.
Right. I think I have much to learn because this is all very new and foreign to me, but I really want to support the families that I advocate with and for the best way I can because there's actually an event happening in Chickaloon this Friday where families are being invited to donate their DNA to the NamUs database to compare. And I just want to find the best way to support them through that.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe you can talk with the person that is taking the DNA donations, and even just getting educated yourself, so that you can kind of relay those messages to to the families, I think would be a great first step.
Awesome. I'll definitely do that. Thank you, Haley. You're amazing.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all for all the good questions. And please fill out the survey if you haven't already. And yeah, this was perfect timing with everything that is happening here in Alaska. All the information you shared is just super relevant. We had we had a webinar with the Alaska Crime Lab, and an update, if anyone joined that previous webinar, is that we now have bone testing here in Alaska. So even from the last webinar we did with the lab, they let us know that they've updated and gotten more lab services. So we are doing bone testing in state now. And then, as Antonia mentioned, we have the NamUs training. So how families can enter their loved ones into the database is coming up at the end of this month. So you can register for that webinar. We're going out to Chickaloon's training event this week as well. So stay tuned. We're all trying to learn together. And just Haley, thank you again so much for sharing your knowledge and your time. And thank you everyone for joining. We'll send out the webinar as a follow-up, and thank you again, and please fill out the survey. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, Anna. You can stop the recording.